Time. The answer is time.
I got nightmares in my head, I fear thoughts build up until I can't hear. That my mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. I got nightmares in my head, I fear the thoughts build up until I can't hear. That my mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper.
Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. Now, when it comes to the timeline, one of the things that has really helped true crime analysis in the last couple of years is the whole advent of cell phones. With cell phones, you can see exactly when texts were sent. You can often tell from where they were sent, and there's often a pattern in terms of the habitual messages and messaging that is taking place. And so what happens when we apply this aspect of the timeline to the Suzanne Morphew case? And so in this analysis, we're going to look at Barry's timeline and see whether it adds up. I mean, one of the central questions we're asking is, if Barry was involved somehow, and if Suzanne's remains were found in Moffat, and if Barry took the remains to Moffat, well, how could he have done that? Is there any kind of window? And obviously this is assuming that the crime was committed at Puma Path and Suzanne was immediately taken at that time to Moffat, which I'm not sure if that is the case, but we do need to start asking those sorts of questions. Obviously there are a number of potential suspects in this case, and Barry is presumed innocent. Before we get to this episode, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. Remember, I'm going to be doing a live where we're going to flesh out this subject in terms of the timeline in a little bit more detail as we talk about timeline as an important tool, certainly one of the most important tools in true crime analysis. And so one of the ways to address the Morphew case, the primary way you want to reinvestigate it is by revisiting the timeline. And we're going to do some of that in this analysis. If you're enjoying this episode, please like, share, leave a comment. You can also hit the thanks button, and let's get started. Now, I'm sure many of you know about the I'm done text that Suzanne sent to Barry. It was dated May 6th, and Suzanne basically died 3 days later. She said, "I'm done, I could care less what you've been up to," but she basically informed him that everything was over. And this was sent at 10:13 a.m., right, in the morning. Now, although you may know about that text, what you may have forgotten is how this message came to light, how this message was actually discovered. Well, guess what? It wasn't found in Suzanne's records. And guess what? It wasn't found on Barry's Verizon phone either. So how on earth did they find this central message? Well, according to the affidavit, pursuant to an authorized search warrant, Barry's Verizon phone was searched by an FBI examiner called Jim Stevens. And so guess what happened? He found an image. So what had happened was Barry had likely swiped the message off his screen, right? And that is one way that you could have deleted it. But instead, what actually happened was this image, this screen grab of that text was inadvertently, which is to say accidentally, saved. Pretty interesting, isn't it? Pretty interesting that of all messages, this one, and some might say very unlucky for some, lucky for others, that this message of all messages wasn't actually in the call records of either of them, and yet it was found on Barry's phone as an image file. And what that seems to indicate is that there's been some deleting, some removal of phone data on some devices. And I always say the absence of evidence is evidence. Now, the thing that is very interesting with the timeline is that you do see, when you study the timeline of the text, you do see things escalating to a very serious point in these last days of Suzanne's life. I'm talking about the tone of her text, the statements that she makes, she's obviously reached a point of I've had enough. And so the fact that she dies within those circumstances, well, is that a coincidence? Is that just happenstance? And so let's have a look at Barry's interview. He gave about 13 interviews, but let's look at his interview June 3rd. That's less than a month after the events. According to the affidavit, on June 3rd, 2020, CBI agents Cahill and Graham interviewed Barry at his home. The interview was audio recorded. Now, on Friday morning, so Barry was asked about that weekend, the weekend where Suzanne disappeared. And of course, now we've got a bit more context based on the fact that we know that she was murdered and we know where her remains were found. And now we want to kind of ask, could Barry have had the opportunity to go there? And obviously, if he didn't, then that in a way helps his defense. On the other hand, in terms of the timeline, the question is, was their relationship heading somewhere positive, or was it escalating beyond the point of no return? And so Barry, by his own admission, says, on Friday morning, May 8th, that's 2 days after the I'm done message, Barry said, we had our text argument. I don't even remember what it was about. She was in one of her moods. So he's saying that they argued, but he can't even remember what it was about. Or maybe it was about infidelity. The footnote to page 24 reads, Suzanne's affair with Jeff Libler started in the late spring or early summer of 2018. And then footnote number 34, Barry would later tell Special Agent Grussing that Suzanne was drunk when he was shown her last proof of life photo that she sent to Jeff Libler at, I don't know if that time is right, is it 2:03 p.m. or was it 2:07 p.m.? Anyway, now we go into the next page. When questioned about the activities Friday evening, Barry responded that they probably watch TV. And Suzanne is usually on her computer. She's typically on the computer, maybe doing a class online. Now, what's quite interesting about that is the fact that he seems to remember detail like that Suzanne was on a computer. And it's interesting because there seems to be some indication that some strange, sinister, unusual activity was taking place around this time where Suzanne seemed to be, or her Facebook account at any rate, was making an unusual number of friend requests of individuals with the name Jeff. Anyway, we'll get to that in a moment. And so Barry said that she didn't apologize about the text that morning. She pretended like nothing had ever happened. Now we go into Saturday. Regarding Saturday, May 9th, that morning, Barry said that he did not set an alarm. He didn't recall what time he got up. He made himself and Suzanne breakfast. He set it next to her bed. He said, I think I made bacon and eggs and toast. So he certainly presents himself as the perfect husband. Regarding Saturday, Barry said that he got home and Suzanne had a bowl of soup ready for him. They talked about hiking and biking. They spent the day together and sat outside in the sun and talked for an hour. It's quite interesting that he locates himself outside the house sitting in the sun. And remember that Suzanne herself was suntanning when she sent that message to Jeff Libler, her final proof of life. Regarding Saturday, Barry said, I honestly don't recall what we did after that, after the soup, but I think we hiked here in the subdivision. Yes, we did hike. We hiked to Fooses that night. Then twice. I'm pretty sure that's the night we hiked Fooses. So that's where he places himself. He says that they were out hiking. They were kind of somewhere in the countryside. And so then the question is, can that be proved? Can it be proved that he was where he said he was? And so obviously there are a couple of ways to do that. One is with cell phone evidence, but I think he turned his cell phone off. The other one is her cell phone. Well, her phone was off as well. The other one is, was there an eyewitness on that hiking trail? If not, then one's got to wonder, where was Barry on Saturday afternoon? What was Barry doing on on Saturday afternoon if he wasn't hiking? Because this is essentially his alibi, isn't it? Barry said, I know we sat down at the lake for a while. I'd say we were gone for an hour and a half maybe. He added, it was actually a good day. She didn't drink at all. It was a normal, nice afternoon. Now, I'm obviously making an inference here. It's just interesting that when he says we were gone for an hour and a half, well, how long does it take to get from Salida, from Puma Path to Moffat and back? Well, just driving time, it would take about 45 minutes each way. That's an hour and a half. Of course, that's not taking into account something like disposal. I'm just saying it's quite interesting. It is also possible that a disposal took place just somewhere else. Anyway, bear in mind the cadaver dogs alerted on the dirt on the trailer, and so it's possible that the hike was actually going somewhere nearby that was nevertheless somewhere in the area. Anyway, according to the affidavit, Barry stated that he got back to the house probably around 3 or 4. So Barry does acknowledge that he left the house at about 2 or so and then came back at about 4. He says they talked about the dinner and she said she was going to make some potatoes. He said he would marinate the steaks. He says, I'm probably in the garage. I usually tinker around, killing time. Quite an interesting comment there, killing time. He added about Suzanne was probably doing sheets, adding that. So what is also interesting is in the middle of all this, someone is doing laundry on this day of all days. Barry says we had 2 different plates that night. Now, this statement was apparently refuted, was corrected by Agent Graham, who said that it appeared there was only 1 plate recovered from among the items in the dishwasher. Barry replied that he must have hand-washed his own plate. The other thing that's really interesting is one infers from this affidavit that the moment the Morphew girls left, things deteriorated very quickly. And it's quite interesting how it's similar to the Chris Watts case where when Chris Watts was with his wife in Myrtle Beach, even though they were together, even though they were staying together, they were nevertheless texting one another. You kind of have a situation like that as well. Even though you've got husband and wife, they're texting one another. They don't seem to want to talk to one another. And so he's asked, why did things deteriorate? Like the moment the girls left, why did you guys start disagreeing to the extent that you did? And his response was because she started drinking, and she was drinking the whole time. Barry, and of course then she doesn't drink on the very last night when they have a perfect night. Anyway, Barry said after multiple assertions that he did not recall what junk he threw away, that he might have thrown away an old pair of boots that had been in the back of his truck. Also, similar to Chris Watts, the changing his boots thing. And the other thing that you may not know is that he apparently also changed his shirts twice, and that was after getting to the hotel. This is according to the timeline. He says, after the CBI told him multiple times that he threw away more than boots, he said, if there's clothes in my truck, they were probably old clothes that I threw away. So Barry seems to be acknowledging he may have thrown away boots and clothes. Chris Watts as well seems to have thrown away some kind of fabric or toys or something like that on the way back from the well site. Barry was told by CBI that he showered at the house before leaving and showered at the hotel when he arrived. And he said, showers relax me. That's 2 showers and them doing the laundry, in the middle of this whole situation. According to the affidavit, when Barry was confronted by CBI agents that the video footage from the hotel contradicted Barry's statements that he was at the wall on the job site when Jean Ritter called, I think that's the neighbor, Barry did not refute the evidence. In other words, Barry said he was at the job site, but actually he was at the hotel. The property of 19057 Puma Path was searched following this interview for the remains or signs of remains of Suzanne. The results were negative. Now, I'm not going to take it further than that. We are going to deal with those Facebook friend requests in a upcoming video. I do want to note that, do you remember in the Murdoch case, there was the allegation that Alex had manufactured an alibi, right? That he had gone to his mother's house very close to the time that everything had happened and then returned. And then he was adamant that he was nowhere near the kennels, but then the video recorded him. In this case, is there a manufactured alibi in the sense of Barry going to Broomfield, but then not doing anything there? If there is, I think the main difference between the two cases is timeline. Murdoch left in the middle of and very, very close to the incident, whereas Barry's trip to Broomfield is much later than when I believe the crime was committed. And so I do think that may be a distraction, is thinking about the events of Mother's Day, when I think we should be concentrating on that Saturday afternoon. What evidence, what information can we get on movements? And the one thing that does come through that's interesting is Barry's vehicle doesn't move around. And so was there any other way that Barry could have gone somewhere, if not in his truck? Also, just a reminder, I'll be doing a live stream later this morning dealing with timeline as an important tool in the TCRS arsenal. It's one of the central things we use to investigate a case. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.